So we're back. It's week 7 of the NFL. We're in week 2 of Fantasy Fridays. Ironically, today's a Wednesday, but we're going to go ahead and shoot Fantasy Friday segment today anyway. Again, thank you, Jorge, for shooting this. Last week, I went 2-1 for the weekend. I'm curious about it. Any of you guys that, if you looked on my page, I'm curious how did you do over the weekend. But I went 2-1. It was a fairly good weekend. Some tough, close calls there. But, you know, when you have a good kicker like Baronis, man, you're able to pull you out a W. But as always, with Fantasy Fridays, I'm always going to tell you who I think you should start and who I think you should sit from the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end position, and talking about starting and sitting defenses as well, okay? Are you ready? Let's get started. So we'll talk about quarterbacks I think you should start for week 7. First of all, you want to start Joe Flacco this week. Going against Buffalo at home, okay? Flacco last week was 27 of 35, 285 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interception, in a double overtime New England loss. Buffalo's currently dead last in the NFL against the run. And they're giving up 82.4 yards a game. So look for Ray Rice to have a big game. Also with Flacco, expect them to hit Bolden, Todd Heap, and Derek Mason, and maybe even Houshmandzadeh in some cases, especially with Buffalo trying to stack up against the run to stop Ray Rice. Also, look for Flacco to keep Baltimore on pace to stay with Pittsburgh in the AFC North. So that should be a good game there, Buffalo at Baltimore. Second, you want to start Matt Hasselbeck this week, guys. Okay, last week he was 25 of 40, 242 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions in a Chicago win. In Chicago, okay. They're at home this week playing against Arizona, who's, Arizona's currently ranked 26 out of 32 against the pass, giving up 242 yards a game, okay? While they rank 26 against the pass, they rank even worse, ranking 29th against the run, giving up almost 141 yards a game, okay? Look for Hasselbeck to find Deion Butler with the loss of Deion Branch. Look for Deion Butler to be a candidate for Hasselbeck. Also, Mike Williams for Seattle. Now, that's one of my sleeper picks in a wide receiver, but I'll tell you about that later. But definitely look for Hasselbeck to have a big game this week. Last but not least, Alex Smith. Alex Smith last week, 16 for 33, 196 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. That's good for him, especially with San Francisco getting their first win. It was a win on the road. It was against Oakland, but that gets them 1-5. They still are 4th in the NFC West, but as the GM for the San Francisco 49ers stated, they're going to win the division, and what better way to get started than win a win against a road team. They're on the road again, playing Carolina. Carolina's currently 0-5. 26 against the run, so expect to see them stuff in the box a little more. Really want to stop Frank Gore, who had a good week last week, so expect to see Alex Smith throwing the ball a little bit more. One-on-one matchups with Vernon Davis down the seam. One-on-one matchups with Michael Crabtree out as his target receiver. So definitely look for Alex Smith to have a big game today. Good game on Sunday. So those are the 3 quarterbacks I think you should start. Let me tell you who I think you should sit. David Garrard or Trent Edwards. Starting quarterbacks for Jacksonville, sit either one of them. Garrard is currently coming off concussion from Monday night's game against Tennessee. He only played about 17 minutes. During that time, he was 7 for 12, 49 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception. Trent Edwards finished the game, didn't do too much better, okay? 14 to 24 yards, 140 yards, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Okay, Kansas City's coming off a tough road loss in Houston, and they want to keep a strong hold on that first place again in the AFC West. So whether you have Garrard or whether you have Edwards, it would be beneficial not to play either one of them. Kansas City is currently 5th against the run at 90 yards, giving up only 90 yards a game. So expect them to stack the box against Maurice Jones-Drew, and if Garrard's playing or Edwards is playing, expect them to be throwing the ball a lot with very low completion percentages. Chad Henne. Another quarterback I think you should sit. Chad Henne, great stat line last week, 23 of 39, 231 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception against that great overtime win against Green Bay. Not so much this week. Going against Pittsburgh, although it is at home, Pittsburgh is leading the league in rush defense with only 64 yards, giving up only 64 yards a game. Though Pittsburgh is 24th against the pass, expect them to make Miami one-dimensional, meaning they're going to shut down the run and they're going to make Chad Henne throw the ball. Expect to see Dick LeBeau dial up a lot of blitzes. You know Pittsburgh loves to get after quarterbacks. Everyone that plays against Pittsburgh have a tough time. Chad Henne will be no different this week. Expect that defense to be very opportunistic to get the ball back to Big Ben. You know, it's the second week back. They want to keep him rolling. They want to keep that offense humming. So definitely expect that defense to create a lot of turnovers and sacks, okay? Last but not least, Kevin Carr. Great game last week. Excellent game last week. 23 of 29 passing, 326 yards, 3 touchdowns, and only 1 interception against Atlanta. However, he's lost Deshaun Jackson. Deshaun Jackson had a concussion. They're also playing on the road this week at Tennessee. Tennessee gets after the quarterback like no other team in football. They're currently ranked 1st in sacks, 2nd in interceptions, okay? And they rotate about 7 or 8 guys up front, so they're always keeping fresh bodies, especially with their defensive front 4. So expect Cole to struggle this week, again, especially losing Deshaun Jackson. Having Jeremy Maclin now as his only deep threat receiver, expect him to be taken away with a lot of double coverage being rolled to his side. So really expect a lot more LaShawn McCoy this week, and you know, just really expect Cobb to have struggles. Those are the quarterbacks I think you should sit down this week. I do have some sleepers for you if you need some guys in a bye week, being that Matt Schaub is on a bye week, being that Peyton Manning is on a bye week, being that Sanchez is also on a bye week. Some guys that are still available. Sam Bradford's available. He's a sleeper pick of mine. Matt Castle is also still available in a lot of leagues. He's also a pick of mine. And Jay Cutler. I picked him last week. Maybe not so much of a starter, but more of a sleeper this week. I think those quarterbacks will be very, very beneficial for you this week. Moving on to running backs, who I think you should start this week. Steven Jackson for the St. Louis Rams. 29 of 109 last week, 1 touchdown. Average is about middle of the road, 3.8 yards carry. Tampa Bay ranks 31st against the run. So, you know, they're giving up almost 158 yards a game, so expect to see a heavy dosage of Steven Jackson. Rams are coming off that great win against San Diego, so this week won't be any different. Expect a lot of handoffs to Steven Jackson very early to get him going. That'll open up Sam Bradford later in the game. Start Steven Jackson. Secondly, start Matt Forte. Now, I know last week he was one of the guys I suggested you sit down, and almost rightfully so. He 8 carries for 11 yards. 1.4 average, but he had 1 touchdown. It was a tough week last week against Seattle. He did cross the goal line. However, he didn't have a lot of action in the game, being that Cutler was sacked 6 times last week. But expect that to change this week with Washington giving up almost 122 yards on the ground and almost 300 yards in the air. Expect Forte to get a lot of carries early and often to settle Cutler in later in the game so the defense can bite on that play action, Cutler going over the top, okay? I really would not expect Matt Forte to have a big yardage total. Do expect him to cross the goal line at least once or twice on Sunday. Last but not least, Frank Gore. Excellent game. 25 carries, 149 rushing yards. I know as fantasy owners want to know what that touchdown total was. It was a big 0, but as you can see, the Gore train has started. I believe after them getting that win against Oakland, you know, Singletary now realizes, hey, in order for him to win, in order to take the pressure off of Alex Smith, they have to get Frank Gore the ball. Don't expect this week to be any different against the 30th ranked rush defense in Oakland. Against Carolina, who's currently ranked 26th against the rush, giving up 134 yards a game. So look for Gore to get the ball early and often and settle Alex Smith in as well, and definitely get those guys going. Those are my running backs to start. We'll tell you about who I think you should sit. The Carolina backfield, Carolina Panthers. Neither Williams nor Stewart has a 100-yard game this year, and that won't change this week against the 49ers. Though the 49ers do need a win, though the Panthers need a win, the 49ers are inspired after their road win against Oakland. Look for the San Francisco defense to stop the run, making Carolina one-dimensional with Matt Moore, who will be starting the game, and or Jimmy Clausen, who will possibly be coming in for mop-up action, possibly 3rd and 4th quarters, okay? Here's a stat you might find interesting. In 3 home games this year, D'Angelo Williams has 0 touchdowns. 0 touchdowns in 3 home games. Jonathan Stewart only scoring once at home. I would definitely sit the Carolina Panther backfield. Number 2, and this is a surprise. It's not a surprise, but it's about face from last week. Ryan Terrain, big game last week, 20 carries, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns in the loss in Indy. I would sit him this week. Chicago is currently ranked 3rd against the run, giving up 84 yards a game. Okay, look for Ryan Terrain's production to take a drop this week. Plus, Mike Shanahan wants to get Keelan Williams, the rookie, a little more involved in the game. He's a little better out of the backfield catching the ball. So you see Donovan McNabb spread the ball around. So you may see number 35, that's Keelan Williams. He is a rookie. Expect him to see him on the field a little bit more, which will ultimately make a dive in Terrain's ball, I guess, getting the ball rather. Excuse me. So definitely see Terrain's production take a dive this week. And last but not least, this was a hard one for a running back to sit, but it just ultimately makes sense for creating a successful win this week. You have to sit down Maurice Jones-Drew. I know that's very tough. Maurice Jones-Drew, he's the steam, he's the ball that gets the Jaguars offense going. But he had a tough night against the Titans. 17 carries for 57 yards, no touchdowns at all. I know you don't sit a guy like him. He is a fantasy stud, but with Garrard possibly out and Trent Edwards still grasping a hold of the offense, expect Kansas City to stack the box and neutralize and/or just take Maurice Jones-Drew out of the game plan, period. Expect to see a lot of 8-man, 9-man fronts with them rolling their safeties down as well to put them in the box to, again, stop the run. You know, with Romeo Crennel operating that 3-4 defense, again, you will see some exotic blitzes, which, again, will ultimately neutralize Maurice Jones-Drew. I recommend you sit him this week. Those are my running backs I think you should sit. Let me give you a few sleeper picks for you guys out there just curious about that. Kansas City backfield. Whether you have Thomas Jones or whether you have Jamal Charles, they're both safe bets. Both crossed the goal line last week against Houston. Both almost, well, Thomas Jones rushed for 100 yards. Charles was 2 yards short, rushing for 98 yards, but he did have a touchdown. They're both safe bets this week. Ray Rice. Expect Ray Rice to have an awesome day. I would expect him to probably climb to the 160, 170 yardage mark and maybe even 2 or 3 touchdowns this week, being that Buffalo is dead last against the run. Expect Ray Rice to have a big game. Expect to see him early and often. Corey Ivory. For you guys that don't know, he is the running back that's running for New Orleans Saints right now. He did have a big game last week. No touchdowns, but expect him to change that this week. He's going to have a good game. New Orleans is currently going against, I have to go to my notes. I'm sorry, guys. They're going against Cleveland at home, and Cleveland is about 23rd against the rush, so expect Corey Ivory to have an excellent game. And he, by the way, he is available. He is a sleeper pick of mine. He is available in a lot of leagues, so definitely grab him. Last but not least, the Seattle backfield. Justin Forsett, been very, I know when Lynch came over, a lot of people were concerned about his carries diminishing, and they have been diminishing, but he's still been a solid fantasy option for you guys. He's only scored once this year, but in the last 3 games, he's amassed 195 yards on 46 carries, and he's averaging about 4 yards a carry. So he's been very consistent. So if you're a little concerned about who to play between Lynch and Forsett, if you have Lynch, start Lynch. If you have Forsett, I would start him as well. If you have both and you're not sure, maybe you start Lynch, flex Forsett out unless you have better option. Those are my running backs I think you should sit. This is Rodney Blair with Fantasy Friday on a Wednesday. We'll be back.